you could say that the archetypal world is, it's in a way, some people think of it as a world of ideas, but it's more than that. It's alive. And so all of the gods and goddesses to whom one asks intercession, or to whom one prays, or to whom one meets in every tradition, exist on the archetypal realm. Now, some are powerful enough to assume a body, or to assume a form that can be seen when they give you darshan. You know, darshan really means visitation. And often, this is an old word that you're sitting maybe on your meditation cushion looking at the image of your teacher, and it suddenly comes alive, and maybe you hear a message. That is a typical use of the word darshan. And but it kind of works for Zoom too, because you see, we have a connection together, and it's a group, but it's not a group really, because each of you is individual when you're in your experience, your personal experience. So you have this visitation. I come to see you. Now, this is what happens with archetypal energy. So for those of you, let's say our European friends who, certainly the Celtic tradition has a rich lineages of goddesses. And there are people practicing, say in England, Ireland, Wales particularly, where they supplicate these goddesses all the time and work with them in their lives. But where are they? If they're not in physical form, you don't see them, but they're on the archetypal realm. So we tend to think of the archetypal realm being somewhere between the physical level and the spiritual level. In other words, if you, those of you who Kathleen used to channel Morgana, who was basically in an earlier state, Morgan Le Fay, a Celtic goddess, who basically I helped her move to the spiritual plane. And in other words, come sort of out of the archetypal level. She still works in the archetypal level, clearly. But basically, it's very hard to understand all of this, except there are planes of experiencing that have to be negotiated and transcended all along the way. It's not just the physical to the spiritual. There's a bunch of levels in between. And yet archetypal figures sometimes are people who have taken physical body, embodiment, but are now trying to work to help humanity. That's one level. But in my own tradition, the Tibetan tradition, when people do their Bardo experience, the journey between lifetimes, they come in contact with a lot of, I guess you here in the West, you would call them demonic. Not that they are demonic, but they're monsters. And those are personifications of people's fear at a broad level, you see. But they're very real when you experience them, even if you know they don't have a physical body you can touch, you can feel their presence. They're archetypal. And so there are many ways to approach the archetypal level, but this is one that I think is beneficial here. So when you invoke Lord Hanuman's presence, you know, Kathleen would, when she was doing it, she would basically, she visualized, you know, that picture they're showing of Ukraine, of the 40 miles of tanks coming into Ukraine. She would just picture Lord Hanuman kind of shooting an arrow into each one. They don't explode, they just dissolve. And the Russian people in it just are suddenly back home. They're not at war anymore. And it's just kind of a gentle little whip. You get rid of the tanks and you get rid of the energy of war, and there's they're young boys, really. Just send them back home. Let them go back to their mothers and their fathers. And so this is using archetypal energy, but it has a purpose. Your creativity and the thought you project are how you direct the energy. So that's way too much of a nutshell, but I hope it's helpful. Thank you for the question.